It's 4 o'clock in Los Angeles. It's 6 o'clock in Sheboygan.
Yeah, it seems like a whole day and night, but here I am in Cranston, Rhode Island. I'm having a good time. I'm here because I've got some film work this week, but I'm able to do the show remotely, thanks to my friend Tommy DiNucci and David Gear for having me up here. And I'm looking forward to our topic tonight. It's going to be a good one.
Absolutely. DiNucci, a good wrestling name. Any
Dominic,
relation to the late Dominic?
We say that he's the long-lost nephew, but we're not exactly sure about that.
Okay. So we'll withhold a commentary until we do like a genealogy search.
It's the same type of family tree that says.
What do we got tonight, Mike? What's on the docket tonight?
We're talking about the immortal one, Hulk Hogan, and definitely a guy who brings out opinions, good, bad, and indifferent. Not a whole lot of indifferent. People are very divided on the legacy of Hulk Hogan. Some remember the good stuff. Some remember the bad stuff. I remember all of it, and I'm sure you do too, Angelo. And tonight I'm going to try to put a personal touch on this just for our viewers that might be tuning in, because there's been so much information about Hulk Hogan, many tribute shows. Your show has investigated the controversial death of Hulk Hogan. I wanted to bring a personal touch and talk about the 8 times that I saw Hulk Hogan wrestle live, talk about some of the ups and downs of being a fan of his and sometimes not being a fan of his, and his impact on the pro wrestling world and on the pop culture landscape in general. Excellent.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mikey, why don't we waste no more time? Let's just get right into it.
Okay. Well, the first memories I have of Hulk Hogan are when I was the first young wrestling fan, and reading a wrestling magazine that had coverage of an AWA Battle Royal in the magazine. And the big story was that Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant bumped heads in this AWA Battle Royal. And the months to come, the story was that Hulk Hogan was feuding heavily with Nick Bockwinkel. For those that remember, Nick Bockwinkel was a very classy gentleman who was the American Wrestling Association world champion several times for several years. Hogan was very favored to win the title from Bockwinkel. He never quite did. Behind the scenes, Hulk claims that Vern Gagne, the promoter, was pushing Hulk to marry one of Vern's daughters, and Hulk did not want to do that, or at least he did not want to be pressured to do that. So Hulk also had a T-shirt dispute with Vern. Apparently, Hulk, on one of his tours to Japan, came back to the United States and discovered that Vern Gagne was selling Hulkamania T-shirts without giving Hulk Hogan a cut. So that's Hulk's version of the story. I'm sure Vern had a different version.
That story, that's crazy.
Yeah. So Hulk got a phone. Hulk had initially left the WWF. Everyone kind of knows this story because Vince McMahon Sr. did not approve Hulk Hogan to take time off to be an actor in the movie Rocky III. So that's how Hulk got to the AWA. But when Vince McMahon Jr. took over from his father, Vince Jr. wanted Hulk to come and be the captain of the ship, so to speak, for the new WWF boom cycle. And that started, I believe, in January 1984. Hulk Hogan defeats the Iron Sheik. We're off and running. And a young Michael, and I remember, Angelo, you might remember this guy. George Michael was a sportscaster in the Washington, D.C. area.
Yeah. I used to work with him, Mikey, at WFIL radio in Philadelphia. Before George Michael did George Michael's Sports Machine, George Michael was one of the boss jocks at WFIL, one of my early station. Mike, you talked about at the beginning of the show, your personal touch. Let me show you a little. I actually met Hulk Hogan. I met him twice. Just the first time I met him here. This is Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Spectrum.
Nice.
I took that picture, and then afterward, he signed a T-shirt for my at the time my wife. And the next picture that you see here is that's actually the back of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually the back of my head. So, yeah, it's you know, kind of strange when you think about, like, you know, meeting a guy that's larger than life, and he turns out to be much larger than you thought he actually was. He's a big dude, Mikey. Hulk was especially early on. He was a big dude.
Yeah, I think he was listed at a legitimate 6'8", and then as the years, you know, later on, he might have shrunk a little bit, as most of us do, due to gravity and spine
Gravity
compression.
and surgery. Yeah, surgery.
Yeah.
You know, I think, Mikey, that leg drop he used to do, man, that did him a lot of damage, brother.
Hulk basically said that. He said that if he could go back and change one thing about his life and career, he would have used the sleeper hold as a finisher, because the leg drop night after night was compressing his back and adding a lot of pressure. I remember being a young man, Angelo, and staying up late because George Michael at 6 o'clock said, "There's a new champion in the World Wrestling Federation, but you're going to have to tune into the 11 o'clock news to find out." So I remember being a school kid and turning on I had a little TV in my room that I wasn't supposed to be watching at 11 o'clock at night, but I turned it on and kept the volume real low because I didn't know who he was talking about, because the Iron Sheik had just won the title a few weeks earlier, and Tito Santana and Don Morocco were feuding for the Intercontinental title. So I wasn't sure what was going on. And I was very surprised when the report was from Madison Square Garden and Hulk Hogan pins the Iron Sheik. And 11 o'clock at night on a school night, I was the first kid in my class, at least, to know that Hulkamania and the WWF was running wild with the WWF title. And
right.
I was able to convince my dad, Maurice Messier, to take me to see the big rematch at the Capitol Center. And I'm sure that they toured this rematch throughout the country, but it was Hulk Hogan and the Iron Sheik for the WWF title. The internet lists that it was a sellout at 18,000 fans in the Capitol Center, which was a great venue for wrestling. And the guest ring announcer, want to take a guess who the guest ring announcer was, Angelo?
Oh, God, at the Cap Center?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Guest ring announcer would I'm going to say something that you would never expect, probably like Pretty Boy Larry Sharp.
It was actually George Michael, the very sportscaster.
Oh, George Michael.
So George Michael was on board. Yeah, and it's interesting because some people thought that George Michael was kind of casually making fun of wrestling, but I don't think he was. I think he loved it, you know, and he was always getting hassled by the legit newscaster, Jim Vance. They had this back and forth where Jim Vance would kind of grimace and moan every time George Michael played wrestling clips on the news, but George Michael kept on doing it. So I got to tell you, Angela, that Capitol Center, I saw Hogan perform there or wrestle there 7 times. I'll go through the matches, you know, but that Sheik one, I mean, it was electric, you know, and at the time, Hogan was using the Eye of the Tiger. And I mean, that is like 1980s personified. It's 1984. Ronald Reagan is in the White House. You've got Eye of the Tiger from Rocky III blaring. 18,000 people. People are still able to smoke on the concourse of the venue. And you got Hulk Hogan coming out and ripping up a yellow T-shirt. I mean, if that's not 1980s, I don't know what is.
Eye of the Tiger. And isn't that the same song they used in the Rocky film?
Yeah, that was like the theme song for Rocky III. And
Rocky III, yeah. And
Hogan,
his character was called Thunderbum or something like that.
Thunderlips.
Thunderlips.
Yeah.
What did I say? Thunderbum.
Thunderbomb. That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, that's a different type of. That's a Pat Patterson reference. But in any event,
Yeah, exactly. Oh God, I miss Pat Patterson.
Banana. He went banana. So the next time I saw
banana.
Yeah. The next time I saw Hogan wrestle Angelo, it's listed at 17,900. It's the Capitol Center. Hulk Hogan pins Greg the Hammer Valentine. And I want to say that, a lot of people, even at the time, the Pro Wrestling Illustrateds, the After magazines, they were always kind of saying that Hogan couldn't wrestle. And that was kind of the smart marks, go-to thing, that if you wanted a wrestling match, you watched Ric Flair or, Randy Savage. And if you wanted a finger and a leg drop, you watched the Hulkster. But in some of those early title defenses against guys like Greg Valentine was working the leg. Hogan was defending. Hogan sold quite a bit for his opponents. I think Hogan's in-ring skills, I think they got simplified by the time we got to 88 or 89. But I think if you watch those early matches, if you can find the early Hulk Hogan title defenses of the first title run against Dr. D, David Schultz, they had something called the Massacre in Minneapolis, where they had this really bloody match that was put on one of the Hulk Hogan tapes. And Hogan title defenses sometimes went 15 or 20 minutes. And I remember this Valentine match went about that. It went about 17 or 20 minutes. So, I think Hogan's in-ring skills are a little bit unfairly crapped upon.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, Mikey, because and again, I will clearly admit, having been in the business for growing up in the wrestling business, I don't know everything. In fact, because I grew up in the wrestling business, I was kind of like blasé to it, to be honest with you. Right. Let's talk to me about Hulk Hogan's ability, his skill set, to use a more recent term. They say that he had the leg drop. He had this was a move, right. The ear was a move. It's just a move. But he didn't have a whole lot of offensive or defensive wrestling maneuvers per se. But he was able to do something, and I want your take on this, because again, I don't see his ability the same way other people do, because to me, he was much more an attraction and entertainer than he ever was an athlete. Okay. And not to take anything away from, he was built like a brick wall. I mean, huge guy, muscle bound and the whole bit. So I'll not take that away from him. But I just don't understand how he survived, and not only survived, Mikey, but really in a lot of senses thrived above and beyond the people that were working with him with a fraction of the ability of a lot of people. What was it, in your opinion, and which I value, by the way, your opinion, tell me and everybody of my mindset, what were we missing?
Charisma. I mean, that's the word that Hogan had. And I think if you look back at the decade of which Hulkamania, Hulk Hogan prospered the most, the 1980s, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a guy with a charismatic, over the top, muscled up physique. Sylvester Stallone, you would say, who's the better actor, Sylvester Stallone or Dustin Hoffman? Dustin Hoffman. But who's got the action figures? Sylvester Stallone. Who's got the franchises? Sylvester Stallone. If you just, it's the right guy at the right time. Politics, even Ronald Reagan had charisma. A guy like Jimmy Carter or Walter Mondale or somebody else in the 80s was probably a better statesman who had more information. But Reagan put the smiling face and the nice haircut on it, you know? So, I mean, I think just a lot of times we are a society, whether it's the United States or the whole world, that a lot of times judges things, the book by the cover, the presentation. And I think with Hulk, he had the sizzle. And I would argue, like I said, I would argue a little bit that Hogan probably withheld some of his best in-ring techniques, and he used them in Japan because there's matches of Hogan in Japan.
You just took the words out of my mouth. Yeah. I was just about to say, I saw a match between Hulk Hogan and Antonio Inoki in Inoki's prime. And that match went damn near an hour.
Right.
And there was mat wrestling and there was chain wrestling. Why didn't Hulk do that here? I, as a fan, and I still consider myself a fan, and be it diminished, of course, because today's wrestling is horrible. But back at that time, I might have even been a Hulkamaniac had I seen him, you know, pull that kind of stuff here. Why do you think he didn't do that in America?
Because he didn't have to, and because probably Vince McMahon Jr., the younger McMahon, probably didn't want him to, because as they were tailoring some of those big matches against Hercules Hernandez or against Harley Race, even as they were tailoring those big marquee matchups for shows like Saturday Night's Main Event, where you had commercial breaks and you were still trying to use the match to sell something else, whether it was an action figure or something else. Yeah. I think Hogan is the champion, or Hogan is the guy that was really the guy where things changed. And it's kind of the expression when you're building the ship while it's in the air. You know, for John Cena and other guys younger than Roman Reigns, for instance, for those guys to come along 20 years after Hogan, Hogan was really the test pilot of how do we get a match over on Saturday Night's Main Event and then still sell the same match for your local house show a week later. And, you know, Hogan was the test pilot wrestler for that type of thing where they're doing, you know, first it was one pay-per-view a year with WrestleMania. And then by the time 1988 was over, you had 4 big pay-per-views. Hogan was the champion when that change happened. That's why I mentioned his first year or two as champion, the matches might have been better because they were mostly house show matches. When you get onto pay-per-view, they have a different set of time constraints because there's other matches on the pay-per-view. The pay-per-view can only be 3 hours long at the time. And so Hogan might have only had 20 minutes to do the posing and the finger and the leg drop, and everything had to be squeezed into a 20-minute allotted time period because you had other matches on the show as well.
Yeah. It's remarkable when you think that back at that time, a guy who literally had his picture on an ice cream bar made more money from selling ice cream than he did from wrestling.
Yeah.
I thought about that and I was like, this is actually, I'm reading this. It's true. They made so much money in marketing and merch. Those guys didn't have to break a sweat, and most of them didn't, to be honest with you. Except for Ultimate Warrior, who was blown up by the time he got to the ring.
Well, that's another. Yeah.
What will the takeaway be from Hulk Hogan's time as champion? Did he, as some people believe, did he diminish the title, or did he add credibility to it? Because there are people, you know, Mikey, you said it at the beginning of the show. People are divided. There's no black and white. I mean, there's no gray with Hogan. It's either black or white. You love him or you don't.
Right. And I would say that I actually like Hogan more since his career was over, because in 1986, I turned on Hulk Hogan when Paul Orndorff did. As a fan, I was cheering Paul Orndorff when he delivered that brutal clothesline on Hulk Hogan during the tag team match with Bundy and Stud. I'll get back to those matches in a minute. But for me, Angelo, I think it's really perspective. I think if you like our friend who wrote the book When It Was Real, Nikita Breznikov, I think for him, he stopped watching wrestling when Hulk Hogan became champion because he was really disgusted with where it was going and he saw it for what it was. But I think there's probably a lot of guys who were Bruno Sammartino fans, they were Pedro Morales fans, they were superstar Billy Graham fans, and they were Bob Backlund fans to various degrees. But when Hogan came around, it was a different animal altogether. And the business, like you said, Angelo, the guys are making money from ice cream bars. Well, I remember being a kid and my mom taking me to a store called Bradley's, which is not even in business anymore. And she's buying me the Big John Studd and the Hulk Hogan action figures. And those were the first wrestling action figures, at least in the United States. I think there's some obscure ones in Mexico and Japan. But as far as like being a kid that was using He-Man action figures to have matches, and suddenly I can buy Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, that was a big deal.
Have to tell you, Mikey, I have, and you would probably actually like this. It's still in the packaging. It's a bootleg Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy action figure. Mikey, it's hilarious because the heads are like 3 times the size of the bodies on these things. And they're from Indonesia. Nice. They were made in Indonesia. Apparently, wrestling is really big in Indonesia. Yeah. But, you talk about action figures. Again, that's money in the bank for these guys. But when it comes to Hulk Hogan, he was, and I will give him this, and I'll give Vince McMahon and the WWF at the time, I'll give them all the kudos in the world because they know how to turn merch. They know how to market. They are probably the best marketing company on planet Earth when it comes to making money and putting somebody's name and face and likeness to a product. There wasn't anything, Mikey, there wasn't anything that you couldn't buy that had Hulk Hogan on it, Big John Studd, Andre the Giant, any of the big 5 at the time, Ravishing Rick Rude, God rest his soul. These guys were like, they were money. Yeah. Why do you think? And maybe I'm probably going to end up answering my own question with that. But I was going to say, why do you think Hogan outdid everybody? And you said the answer earlier, the charisma. It's that quality that you can't package. You have it or you don't, right? Like, go ahead, Mikey.
Well, you put it this way. Hogan started in the WWF as a bad guy in 81, 82. And Hogan as a bad guy had the same charisma. And if you just, as they did, when he went to the AWA, Vern Gagne give him credit for repackaging Hogan as a fan favorite, because if you take this guy who's a big, good-looking guy, looks like he's from the beach, looks like he just wrestled a shark, for its dinner, and then you make him a good guy where people can get behind, the challenges, and I think the accomplishment of Hogan was to make his opponents, who were typically, like a Greg Valentine, was considerably shorter than Hogan. And Hogan has to make these guys look like a threat, which he successfully did. And I think the other thing, to answer your question, why Hogan, I have to give a lot of credit to the title change, the 2 title changes, Backlund to the Iron Sheik. Give everybody their credit. Give Backlund credit for being a good sport and losing the title via the Camel Clutch, Arnold Skaaland throwing in the towel. That was a masterful storyline to get Backlund away from the title, but not making Backlund looks noble in defeat. So that was really smart. The Sheik looks treacherous. The Sheik with Freddie Blassie looks evil and treacherous, and he's a threat to the United States and to our way of living. And then they have Hogan, who comes in like a lightning bolt. Hogan had only been back in the WWF for a month when he won the title, and it worked. it's kind of like if it didn't work, we could be sitting here analyzing it, 30 years later, but we probably would be thinking about other things. And you
Mike,
take
I got a question for you, because you just mentioned something, and it prompted a question, because this is where sometimes I'm not like on the same level as the wrestling fan.
Yeah.
Which came first? Was it the Rocky movie that came first, or was it Hogan's title win over Sheik?
The Rocky movie came out in the summer of '83. The title victory came in January of '84 by my memory.
Of '84. Okay. I was trying to remember, because my wife at the time, God rest her soul, she passed away. My wife at the time was pregnant with my daughter, and that was 42 years ago.
Right.
That happened. I remember, because Hogan won the title the day my daughter was born.
Wow.
Yeah.
January,
and that's the only reason I remember. But what I didn't remember, and thank you for putting the timeline for me, is that the movie came first. And so at that point, was Vince Sr. still alive? Because Vince Sr., I remember hearing this. Hogan had said something at one point where he said, "Terry, you're a wrestler, you're not an actor. If you make that movie, you'll never come back here." You know what I'm talking about. Okay.
Yeah, that was in '82 when Hogan was still in the WWF the first time, the WWF. Yeah.
What changed between then and the title win? Why did Vince Sr. let him back in?
Because it was Vince Jr. who brought him back in.
Oh, when Senior passed, what, 82, 83?
I think Senior didn't pass till '84, maybe even '85. But Vince Jr. was basically taking over the reins as Vince Sr. was getting sick. So
see, this is where my timeline is, folks, because and I remember some stuff, but again, Mikey, I haven't followed this. I haven't talked about wrestling in so long, so long, that everything, when you don't talk about it every night like we used to do, like 4 nights a week before, you forget. Like the timelines become like a distant memory. You forget stuff.
The key to remember, Angelo, is that it was Vince Sr. who basically gave Hogan the ultimatum. It's either the movies or this movie, or you're wrestling here in the WWF. Hogan said, "I'll take the movie," and he did the movie. And then Hogan was still in the AWA in the summer of '83 when the movie came out, and that's when Vince Jr. saw the movie and said, "We better get this guy back, because
exactly.
if I don't get him back, then Vern's going to run with this guy." And
man, Vern Gagne was brutal, brother. He was brutal.
Yeah, there's even a little, just as little historical factoid for the hardcore wrestling fans. Hulk Hogan was actually advertised to tag team with Wahoo McDaniel at Starrcade '83 against Cowboy Bob Orton and Dick Slater, but Hogan, of course, was already under negotiations with Vince Jr. So that match Hogan wasn't there. Mark Youngblood took Hogan's place in that tag team match.
So we have a comment in it's Ruffian. Hey, Ruffian, I barely remember wrestling. I still play the games, though. Ruffian, do you remember Hulk Hogan? His impact. What did you think growing up watching Hulk Hogan wrestle, Ruffian? By the way, El Ruffian is a friend of mine. He's also a loyal member. He's here. He works a lot. So sometimes he gets here late. Sometimes he doesn't show up at all because he's working. What happens when you have a family to take care of and you got to pay the bills. But Mikey, there's this interesting thing about Terry Bollea, the immortal Hulk Hogan. Vince McMahon Sr. Created this character, came up with the name Hulk Hogan.
Right.
They had a problem, I understand, getting the use of that name because I think it was either DC Comics or Marvel Comics, whoever held it. It wasn't Marvel. Now,
Yeah, it was
could you
Marvel.
tell everybody what I'm talking about?
Yeah, basically, pretty simple. That the Marvel Comics had copyrighted the Incredible Hulk, the Green Monster, Bruce Banner, and that was an icon or a copyright of Marvel Comics. Hulk Hogan, I think, had started using, as many wrestlers did, like the Freebirds didn't ask permission from Leonard Skinner to use the Freebird song. You know, they just started doing it. So Hogan just started using the Incredible Hulk Hogan, you know, Incredible Hulk as his nickname.
Yeah.
And Marvel Comics eventually stepped in, and WWF or Vince McMahon had to settle that up. So for a long time, Angelo, you're right. If you had a WWF program, there was usually some little fine print in the program that said, you know, the Incredible Hulk is a trademark of Marvel Comics used with permission. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting stuff.
Well, I brought that up. It's funny because I brought that up and you mentioned that, and thank you for mentioning the Freebirds. The interesting thing is the Freebirds using Leonard Skinner's Freebird, they were thrilled with it. Come to find out, all the members of Leonard Skinner were big wrestling fans. Of course, they're a bunch of redneck boys from the South. So they knew who the Freebirds and the Von Erichs were and all that.
Right.
I saw a show today that you might be interested in, talking about this kind of stuff. Our mutual friend, Scott Levy, Raven, the wrestling's Raven, there's a documentary on him called The Raven Effect. Right. And I saw it on Tubi TV. They used music at will without getting permission from people. Billy Corgan, of course, is a musician, the lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins. And he said that most of these people don't mind if you use their music. They actually consider it, you know, quite a compliment because it's getting their music out. The problem is when you run into the lawyers that work for the record company who right. don't like copyright infringement. When Hulk Hogan started to call himself, and very briefly, by the way, too, the Incredible Hulk Hogan, and he was even introduced that way by people like, you know, Ed Darien and Howard Finkel and various ring announcers around the country. How much backlash did WWF as an entity face for that unauthorized user? Did they have to pay something, or did they just quietly like settle it out of court?
Well, I don't know the exact details because I wasn't, you know, behind the scenes, but I would say that if you watch the WWF programming that you can find on YouTube, you can find that when they went to commercial bumpers, even in late as 84, 85, 86, sometimes they'd have something like Michael Jackson Thriller playing as they're going to commercials. And this is when people on YouTube upload their old VHS tapes directly to YouTube. You can find stuff like that. But when you're watching stuff on the WWE network 5 years ago, or Peacock or Netflix, if you're watching an old WWF show, they have highly censored and highly edited out any copyrighted music. And I think it's just a sign of the times, Angelo, that back then they didn't have the resources of AI, you know, to investigate every program, and people weren't aware of copyright, or they didn't care as much back then, because without VCRs and DVD recorders to tape every show, if it aired once on TV, you kind of got away with it, right? So
absolutely. And Hulk Hogan was probably the most bootlegged wrestler in history, I would venture to say. Mikey, you mentioned something. Actually, let me bring this up. El Ruffian mentioned something just a moment ago. He capsulizes Hulk Hogan's entire career in one sentence. So he dropped the Incredible, just went Hulk Hogan, and then went heel and used Hollywood Hogan. That's a 35-year career in one sentence, which I thought was brilliant. But I have a question about that. Why is it that some people, for example, Bob Backlund was a baby face for years, tried to go heel. Didn't work for him. The whole Mr. Backlund character. Hulk Hogan goes from the red and yellow to black and white. You know, the NWO, the New World Order Hogan.
Right.
How does he get away with it and not lose his fan base while other people is committing career suicide?
I think that's a very interesting question. I think part of it was by the mid to late 90s when Hogan and the NWO were doing their thing. You could boo Hogan, but still appreciate the act, if that makes any sense. Like when Hogan came out to Jimi Hendrix Voodoo Child, the place went nuts. I mean, people made noise. Now, once Hogan started cutting a promo, it's almost if the fans took on their role, like, okay, we're supposed to boo this guy now because he's the bad guy. So I think that there was an incredible education for the wrestling fan between the mid 80s and the mid 90s, which is fans, it became acceptable to realize we're part of the show. The fans are in on the act. And we like the fact that Hogan's in the building with us. So we're going to cheer when he comes out. But once he starts talking about Sting or Diamond Dallas Page or whoever else, we're going to boo him. I mean, I think, and El Ruffian just put it succinctly once again. El Ruffian says, honestly, he was a fun heel. Because when you had that Hulk Hogan with the ridiculous, facial, his face is black.
The black,
yeah. I mean, I would.
That was over the top. It really.
let me tell you these other matches. I saw Hogan defend the title, and then we'll get into more pop culture.
I'll tell you what, Mike. I want to ask you to hold up on that one for just a second. We have to do a commercial spot right now that actually you are responsible for. 7 years with our friends Kyle Miller at Manscaped, and let's take care of this, and we'll be right back, folks.
Well, that's the show. We said our piece. You're on a hot date. You're making the cut. You can't be dealing with a faulty left nut. Manscaped is the answer for your gnarly nut sack. Before that babe tells you to hit the road, Jack. In this crazy world of ours, we're often climbing the walls. In all of the confusion, don't forget about your balls. Manscaped to the rescue for your precious crown jewels. Get it today, don't delay. Please be good to your tools. 88.7 WTBR Radio.
It's 7:38 in Philadelphia. It's Mike and the Mad Dog on WTBR Radio 88.7, and we are live back with Mikey and the Mad Dog. And tonight, our special topic, the investigation into Hulk Hogan's death. But we're going to concentrate much more on his impact on professional wrestling now and then, and his effect on pop culture. Mikey, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
There is still today what they're calling the Hogan effect.
Okay.
And I actually heard Tony Khan use that term. He calls it the Hogan effect. Describe to me, if I'm not a wrestling fan, what's the Hogan effect?
I'm trying to know if I've heard that term. What do you think it is? And I'll expand on it.
And it's interesting because the first thing that I thought of is a guy who can go from babyface to heel without having to change his character. All he did was change his look. If you watch Hogan the babyface and Hogan the heel, he's the same guy. The only thing that's different is the way he looks. He appears menacing with the really, scrawny, like black, real obviously over the top black beard, which is really just kind of shoe polish over the stubble.
Right.
But Hogan, he was a natural blonde-haired, blue-eyed Italian guy. To be honest with you, people don't know that.
I've got I've got a definition.
Go ahead.
I've got a definition of the Hogan effect in professional wrestling from Copilot. The Hogan effect refers to the massive cultural and business impact Hulk Hogan had on professional wrestling during the 1980s and beyond. It describes how Hogan's charisma, larger-than-life persona, and media transformed wrestling from a niche sport into a global entertainment phenomenon, brother. I'll give you an example of the Hogan effect. There was a short-lived show on television. I think it was CBS or ABC. That was Dolly Parton had a variety show. And I think on the very first episode of Dolly's show, she said that she had read in the Inquirer or Star magazine, a report that she was going to leave her husband and have a romantic liaison with Hulk Hogan. Like she was reading this from a tabloid, right? So Dolly, being Dolly, decided to have fun with it. And she made a music video called Headlock on My Heart. And she enlisted the actual. So she enlisted the real life.
That's funny.
Yeah, she enlisted Hulk Hogan with the permission of the WWF because they had Hogan and his whole regalia, and they filmed this music video of Dolly and the Hulkster having a romance. And the segment was so popular that 2 weeks later, because this was before everyone had a VCR, 2 weeks later they replayed the same video note for note on the show again, and that link can be found on YouTube. So no offense, but can you imagine Linda Ronstadt singing a song with Bob Backlund, or Barbara Mandrell or Barbara Streisand singing for Bruno Sammartino?
I popped for that, Mikey, and there's a reason. I have to confess. I lived in Tennessee for 15 years. Not all that far from where Dolly Parton lives. Okay. Yeah. And I will tell you, I am not, never have been, never will be a country fan, and I cannot stand, and my family knows this, I cannot stand Dolly Parton. But when you talk about Dolly Parton having quote unquote tabloid affair with Hulk Hogan, I just had to lose it. I popped for that, brother. That was good stuff. I needed that laugh. That was a good laugh, brother.
Well, if you think about how many people were watching the Dolly Parton variety show that weren't wrestling fans, right? And they see this 6'8" guy bouncing around the ring with Dolly Parton, and they just think to themselves, "Hey, that guy's kind of cool," or "That guy's funny," or "What is this guy doing?" And then the next time they're flipping their channels on a Saturday morning, they find WWF Championship Wrestling and Hogan's doing a promo for the local match in their arena. Maybe they bought a ticket. Who knows? But that's the Hogan effect. He's taking something it's still niche to an extent, but he helped bring it to the mainstream, where by the time we got to WrestleMania 5, Hogan versus Randy Savage set all types of pay-per-view records. And Hogan versus Andre the Giant has Mary Hart as the guest ring timekeeper. And I mean, that's the Hogan effect. He brought something that I really hate when Vince McMahon Jr. said the whole smoke-filled arenas thing. That's such garbage. But he brought something into the mainstream like an Arnold Schwarzenegger brought bodybuilding into the mainstream. That's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah, that's an excellent analogy. Mikey, I have a video here. It's about 3 minutes long. With your permission, I would like to play this. Let's check this out. It's interesting in that there's no vocal in it. It's just I put a small music bed under it. And that's all clips that you and I have seen before. But let's just put it in a little different context. Here you go.
Hey, well done, Angelo. That was nice.
Thank you. Yeah, and these are all publicly available clips, by the way. So, and thank you to Odyssey for the use of them. Appreciate everything that they've done and keeping us clean of copyright infringement, which is very important, especially when you're putting a clip like that together, because a lot of this stuff is publicly available. And in fact, it's all publicly available. But when you add just a little bit of music to it that you can create now at home, you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. It makes it all the worthwhile, because I think people appreciate seeing stuff like this that maybe they haven't in a long time. And it's important to say this, because so much of what we want to do, we can't, because we're afraid of stepping on somebody's, copyright toes. We didn't have to worry about that tonight, and I appreciate everybody at Odyssey Video for their help. Mikey, when you look at a video like that, right? And let me just pull this up here. Just to remind everybody to like and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. And Mikey and the Mad Dog is available every day on demand at WTBR.podbean.com. And tonight's show is Hulk Hogan, his impact on wrestling and pop culture. Mikey, we talked earlier for a few minutes about the Hogan effect. I didn't really quite understand what that was. I just heard Tony Khan use it, and I thought, I want to talk to Mikey about this. Yeah. And so I'm glad that you went and ran ahead and let Co-Pilot answer that, because it's much more in depth than I thought it would be. Hulk Hogan's effect then and now, he still has this effect that we now know it's called the Hogan effect. Now we know what it is. Talk to me, in your opinion, Mikey, about what you see in professional wrestling's landscape today that could be construed as the Hogan effect. I think I have one, but I'm not real sure. and I'll throw it at you. And if you want to expound on it, please do. Smarten me up, as they say in wrestling.
Okay.
There's a guy in AEW named Maxwell Jacob Friedman.
Sure.
Hogan effect, yay or nay?
As far as a heel being popular and back and forth, that type of thing.
As
Is that what you mean?
far as his charisma, his ability to make you hate him, his ability to make you love him, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes you love him and hate him.
I would personally make more of a comparison to Friedman or Maxwell MJF to Roddy Piper, actually. But I think, MJF is a student of the game. I'm sure he's familiar with Hulk Hogan promos, but I think his persona is more of a devious Piper nature, in my opinion.
Okay.
But I would say that as far as the Hogan effect, I would go to things like guys who use wrestling instead of being the be-all, end-all of their lives, like a Bruno Sammartino or a Bob Backlund. I think you look at guys who Hogan did Suburban Commando and the Mr. Nanny and No Holds Barred, and movies that were okay but not great. But a couple of generations later, you have Dave Bautista doing the biggest movies in the world. He's going to be the Highlander reboot as the Kurgan. You have John Cena doing television shows on HBO. You have The Rock. I mean, need I say more about him? I don't think any of those guys really would have had those opportunities if Hogan didn't do those B movies that he did, Mr. Nanny and Suburban Commando. And people at the time did not rush to the theater to see Suburban Commando or Mr. Nanny. They were kind of they weren't a big deal, but they were movies that a pro wrestler was doing. Even Thunder in Paradise, you showed a clip from there. That was Hogan had a syndicated TV show that really wasn't bad. I mean, you had Carol Alternate. She was gorgeous. You had Lemon's son was in the show. Hogan was decent in that show.
Chris Lemon.
Chris Lemon. It was a decent enough show. I don't think guys 10 or 15 years later would have had the opportunities that they did, especially The Rock, to bust through that door if Hogan didn't kind of crawl underneath the door first and wiggle it open for them.
Mike, I have kind of a loaded question for you.
Yeah.
Roman Reigns, Hogan effect, is he destined for that? Because he looks like a fucking movie star.
Right.
He looks like a movie star.
Yeah.
We already know he can wrestle. We already know he's got a level of charisma.
Yeah.
Does a guy like Roman Reigns have the same it factor that makes you mentioned, Bob Backlund and Bruno and Pedro and Superstar Graham. All of these guys had that intangible. Hulk Hogan certainly had that intangible in spades. Is there a guy like in the WWE today? I almost said WWF. Is there a guy in the WWE today like Roman Reigns who has that intangible? Is it Roman or is it somebody else that I don't know?
I think you could actually look to the women's roster and see someone like Liv Morgan who has a lot of charisma. And if you put Liv Morgan in a horror film, that would be money. I mean, because Liv Morgan has kind of this petite, sexy, a little bit crazy. She's a marijuana user, which is popular now. I think if you put Liv Morgan in a Rob Zombie movie or even a Mike Messier movie, and the movie would go through the roof. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and she's from Jersey. She's a Jersey girl.
Yeah, and I think on the male roster, Cody Rhodes has Street Fighter coming out really soon. I think Roman Reigns, to answer your question, could totally be a movie star. He has the look. He basically looks like a better looking Jason Momoa, who's a big star. And even
I've
guys,
heard the comparison. Jason Momoa looks like he could get in the ring, brother. He's a big dude.
He's a big dude, but he's a little bit older. And I'm just saying that if you look at Roman Reigns and you look at Momoa, they're kind of cut from the same cloth, but Roman's probably 5 or 10 years younger and probably in better shape.
Right.
So I think that, even when you showed that video, which was really good, Angelo, there's so many things in that video that we haven't talked about tonight. Hulk Hogan.
Oh my God, yeah.
Hulk Hogan was on the Tonight Show first with Joan Rivers as a guest host, and it went over so well that they had to bring him back when Johnny Carson, the regular host, was back on. I mean,
and Johnny did nothing but talk about how big Hogan's arms were the entire interview.
Yeah. Speaking of which,
some of these never seen anybody, human being with arms that big.
Let me get to some of these other matches that I saw as a kid. Hogan. Oh
God, absolutely, Mike. It's your show tonight. You can talk about anything you want.
Hogan beating Big John Studd by countout October 18th, 1985. That was actually a school night. So the next day at school, I was pretty groggy. February 9th, 1986. This was quite the weekend for me. A Friday night NHL Capitals game, a Saturday night Capitals game, a Sunday afternoon WWF show, Hulk Hogan defeating Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. coming out after the match. Rest in peace to Dory Funk Jr., just passed away last week.
Yeah, sure did.
Here's the big one, Angelo. Probably the best match I saw Hogan in live. October 17th, 1986, Capitol Center. This was the big feud. This was before WrestleMania 3. This was a feud that unfortunately never got a big pay-per-view match because there weren't many pay-per-views at the time. But Hulk Hogan beating Paul Orndorff in a steel cage match. These guys had, 2 or 3 runs with Hogan as champion in 84 and 86. This was the 86 feud. It was the precursor to WrestleMania 3 with Hogan and Andre. What a great match that was. And then the last 3, December 7th, I went to the Saturday night's main event, December 7th of 87. Hogan pins King Kong Bundy. And this is the one where Andre the Giant was wearing the sport coat, and Andre attacked Hogan and headbutted him in the back of the head afterwards. So I was there for that. A few years off, and then Hogan defeating Sergeant Slaughter with Randy Macho Man Savage as a special guest referee, September of 91. That was one of Hogan's last title runs in the WWF. And finally, I had a really bad seat, but I was there for Starrcade 97, Hogan and Sting and Bret Hart, and really a catastrophe of a main event for Starrcade. But I did get to see Hulk Hogan at Starrcade. I was in the building at least. The view was not so great from the cheap seats, but I was there for that one.
There you go. I have to tell you, you mentioned the Hogan Slaughter match with Randy Savage as a special guest referee. They did that match in Philadelphia also. And rather than switch the title, which they rarely did in Philadelphia, what they did was they had Randy Savage get knocked out.
Yeah.
In comes Lanny Poffo to make the count. Of course, it didn't count.
Right.
But I thought it was really, really, really clever that have the ref's brother come in.
Right.
It was great, but I did see that one in Philadelphia.
That's good.
They did that a few times with that was when, if I remember right, that was during Slaughter's anti-American crusade, right?
Yeah, that was Slaughter. Slaughter came back to the WWF, and the deal that Vince Jr. made him take, the deal with the devil, was you're going to turn on the USA and become an Iraq sympathizer, Sarge. And
that was the one.
Sarge didn't want to do it, but his wallet wanted him to do it, so he did it. And there you go.
Hello, hey, he's going to eat for another year, for sure.
Right.
Mike, I'll tell you what, brother, we could not have timed this any better. 8:00. That's beautiful. In closing, your final thoughts on what will be the lasting legacy of this, albeit controversial, but also much beloved American icon. And I think it's not an understatement in any way, shape, or form to say that Terry Bollea, the immortal Hulk Hogan, is certainly an American icon. He has earned his place in immortality. Your thoughts on Hogan?
I would say to wrap it up with a different take on it. When the Hogan controversial, sex tape / racism tirade came out, and people got very upset about it, as well they should. But first of all, that was an invasion of privacy. There was a big lawsuit. I mean, you could say that Hogan put Gawker out of business. He body slammed this Gawker into oblivion and maybe made privacy rules for everybody, celebrities and everybody else, more intense. So we could even say that Hogan was a sacrifice in that regard. But I think,
and that kind of, you went where I thought you were going to go, and I'm glad you did, because part of that, his impact on wrestling and pop culture, certainly the Gawker trial was absolutely hit an immediate and direct effect, not only on pop culture, but on the limitations of the press. Let's put it that way.
Right.
There's only so much pushing you can do, and then a person does have a right to their privacy.
Right.
I'll tell you what, man, we really can just go crazy on this, because it's one of those subjects that you can.
Well, let me just say this part.
No, because I want you to continue with that, because I know that you're not finished, and I want you to absolutely go for sure.
Well, a lot of people were offended, and rightfully so, that Hogan used the N-word repeatedly, and not just in a flippant way like the UFC fighter Dustin Poirier recently did. But Hogan, it was really a nasty kind of attack on this young man that may or may not be dating his daughter, and Hogan had reservations about that, and so on and so forth. So it's an ugly tirade, but you have to remember Hogan was under the influence of marijuana. He was sleeping with his buddy's wife, which people seem to forget about that. So, I mean, his state of mind was pretty altered. And also, behind closed doors, people say a lot of stupid things. I've said stupid things. I'm sure every single person listening to this has said something out loud that they wish was not recorded for the whole world to listen to. So
I was just going to say, Mikey, you didn't have a hot mic in your room.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of, and I think this is why it hurt people's feelings and why some people will never forgive Hogan. And it's because it's like if Santa Claus said something racist, and if you were a part of the group of people, the minority people, or any group, or even just a person with ethics that was like, I can't believe Santa Claus is racist. It's not that it's offensive. It's that it's hurtful. I think people were genuinely hurt, because it's kind of like if you were a young black kid or a black kid when Hogan was champion, and you grow up, it's like, man, even the Hulkster hates me, or even even Hulk Hogan, who I bought the T-shirt and I cheered for him, and I was cheering when he fought Andre. Even he is a racist, and I think that's what people don't talk about. They talk about what Hogan said and how disgusting it was and all that, but they don't talk about the effect coming from a place of disillusionment and disappointment, and genuine people had their feelings hurt by Hogan because they put him like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus, or name your hero. Like he had reached the mythical proportions of a non-human being who makes mistakes. I don't even think Hogan understood what I just said, because Hogan, couldn't quite understand why people didn't accept his apologies and so forth. But it's like your ego, or not your ego, but your character in your myth, in your legend, got to be so wrapped in the American flag and so wrapped up in the way things should be, that when you prove to have human faults like the rest of us, it really disappointed people, and it really brought up a lot of bad feelings, like even the Hulksters against us. And I think that kind of shows you how over he was in a warped way. that people felt so bad about it.
Mike, I got a question for you. People are quick to judge and slow to forgive, but let's change the trajectory. How will history remember Hulk Hogan? Will history forget? Will time forgive?
I think Hogan will be remembered similar to way Babe Ruth is remembered. Like Babe Ruth is remembered as this great baseball player, and then a smaller contingency remembers, oh yeah, he was also a womanizer or a gambler or a heavy drinker or whatever. Right. Like, so I think it's always going to be the big headline is the good stuff, and the subheading or the asterisk at the bottom of the article is the bad stuff. I think that's
absolutely what it'll be. Who's in the chat here? Ruffian. Let's finish out with Ruffian. I heard the tape. Honestly, the words didn't bother me that much. I agree. People say dumb shit behind closed doors. People are human. We have, and that's the thing. The final word, I think, is Messier and Ruffian. Hogan is human. He was human. Now he truly is the immortal Hulk Hogan. And I think history will judge fairly Hulk Hogan. As for Terry Bollea, I don't walk in Terry Bollea's shoes. I never have, but I must confess that it was probably very difficult to sacrifice your life for the life of a person that doesn't really even exist. Don't forget, we have to remember Hulk Hogan was a character. He was not a person. The person's name was Terry Gene Bollea.
Right.
Hulk Hogan was a fictional character that wrestled and pretended to beat people up and did some cheesy movies and some good stuff, but largely his message was positive. Take your vitamins, say your prayers, to do all the good stuff, that you're supposed to do. I hope that history and time forgives, and that's a heck of a nice little note to leave everything on. Mikey, it's MikeyMessier.com. Tell everybody where they can get you all your stuff that they see behind you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This is my Hulk Hogan tribute artwork, which I still own that one, but you can go to MikeMessier.com and Mike, MikeMessier.com. I really appreciate it if people picked up either the print copy or the Audible book, Fight or Play Basketball. That's my novel. Angelo and I are going to do a special episode on that in a few weeks. And I think if people actually, if you haven't, I think even Audible expanded library is part of that now. So if you happen to be an Audible subscriber and you have the expanded subscription, I think you can listen to Fight or Play Basketball for free as part of your subscription. And it's also in the world of Hoopla and Barnes and Noble and everything else, MikeMessier.com.
Terrific. And you guys that are looking for merch from WTBR and Mikey and the Mad Dog, easy stuff, simple stuff. Just check it out. WTBR.podbean.com. You can go there and check out the merch section. Look at our bios, look at the gallery, see upcoming shows, and there's a lot of them. Trust me when I tell you. And we got some heavy hitters coming, some actors, actresses, got a couple film directors coming up, and maybe a surprise or two even for Mr. Messier, who I've not told yet. Okay. But I promise I will because you're my co-host and I have to. Right. But check everything out at MikeMessier.com. Also, check everything out here at What's the Buzz Popcast at gmail.com. If you've got questions, suggestions, show ideas, you can reach me on the Mad Dog at WTBR.podbean.com or at What's the Buzz Popcast at gmail.com. And again, it is Tuesday night, and every Tuesday night is Mikey and the Mad Dog. Every Monday night is Behind the Veil. But Mike and I are going to do a show coming up where Monday and Tuesday we are going to do nothing but pander to you to buy our stuff because we got stuff to sell and it's piling up in the warehouse and we got to get rid of this shit, by God. So he's got like 75 or 80,000 books that are like, sitting in Florida somewhere in storage. We got to sell that stuff. We got to get these T-shirts. So he had like 5,000 T-shirts made. We got to sell them suckers. So we're gonna take a couple nights, Mikey, and just sell shit.
All right, sounds good.
We're gonna do that, and then we're gonna do Fight or Play Basketball. I actually have a guest coming on for that show.
Good.
That can relate to your book, and I was going to tell you about it later, but I just told you. There you go. So now you know, folks. It's Tuesday night. It's time to say goodbye to everybody. And as Papa DeCipio has always said, tomorrow is promised to no one, so make the day count. Be nice to somebody. Be good. Hold the door for an old lady. Help someone cross the street. Do something kind, by God. On behalf of Mikey, the Movie Maker Messier, I am the Mad Dog. Take care. God bless, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.